Hey guys, what's up? My name is Carlos. Welcome to Strength in Flux. Let's continue our conversation about the Psoas. So, quick little review. Your Psoas is primary hip flexor, trying to kick that kettlebell, hip flexor, hip flexor, hip flexor. It's got a big job, right? The antagonist of it is predominantly the gluteus maximus, which does hip extension. And Psoas connects up through your abdomen. If you've ever had it worked on, you know it's special up to T13. So like we talked about in that last Strength in Flux, a lot of times people have a very hard time being able to achieve true neutral pelvis and hip extension without rounding this way. It's very clearly seen in the plank, for example. So in the plank, I'll instruct people to tuck their pelvis up and in, and they're unable to do that without this. So they're basically using their hip flexor to accomplish that, or to give them the illusion that they're accomplishing that. So the best way to mobilize your body, in my opinion, is to learn how to move well so that you can teach your body how to feel better. In other words, I just said those in several words, but it's hard to explain in the way, like in just like a 15-minute video where I'm trying to just like break this down really fast. But the way that I see it is that your muscles aren't just like randomly tight. They're not just being dicks. There's a reason, and usually it's in an effort to gain stability. So if your core, very general term, but if your core is weak and your psoas does work as a stabilizer of your spine, in addition to a flexor of your spine, it assists in flexing your spine, it's got a lot to do. And so if hamstrings are another really great example. If you lack core stability, it's often one that will do a lot of that work for you. So for example, if you're unable to achieve a neutral pelvis using your lower abdominals and pelvic floor and transverse abdominis, then your psoas will be like, okay, I'll do that for you. And that starts a lot of shoulder problems, shit like that. So passive stretching might feel good in the moment, but what I find is that normally people are stretching things they don't need to stretch. They're targeting the wrong things. So in this example, psoas, I wouldn't try to loosen it that way because it's doing a pretty important job, right? That's why it tightens right back up. Same with your hamstrings. What you have to do is you have to figure out how you're moving poorly, move better, and give your poor fucking psoas a break. So the most effective ways to mobilize your body is to actually just build shit like this into your training. So I do a lot of correctives with people. When they're learning them from me, they take a lot of time because I demand, let's say, request that they're done as perfectly as possible. There's always gonna be some error, right? Like it's never gonna be perfect. I never do anything perfectly. I almost fell backwards. I guess I don't like talking to a fucking phone by myself perfectly either. But what you're really trying to learn how to do, or what I'm trying to teach them how to do, is how to feel when it's not right. So usually it'll feel like either discomfort or, oh, I felt that in my shoulder, I felt that in my lower back, and to be able to troubleshoot what you were doing incorrectly, maybe, so that you can feel better and move more appropriately. So it's a process, but I always build in strength with it. First couple sessions might be dumb shit like plank, boring shit like planks, breathing, stuff like that. But we get right to the weights because I want you to start implementing these strategies right away. So I don't talk about hip mobility much in Fix Your Shitty Movement, even though it's probably been more requested than anything else, because actually it's kind of advanced. You have to be able to hold, first of all, you have to have that awareness of your body, right? Like I was just talking about, like, can you, I should probably move this guy. Can you move your pelvis independent of your spine? Can you move your spine independent of your pelvis? That was a trick question. You can't move your pelvis independent of your spine. Your pelvis will always take your spine with it in one way or another. Lumbar, that is. Okay, so you might have seen a hip flexor stretch where you're in a kneeling position, like so. I'm going for it again, right? And this is kind of along those lines. Instead of just stretching at the beginning of a workout, first of all, you shouldn't do that anyway, but remember what I just said. Not only is psoas responsible for a lot of really important movements in your workouts, or at least should be, unless you're doing stupid fucking workouts, stretching it, you have to think of it like a spring, right? Like muscles work on spring tension. If you stretch out a slinky or something, like it's suddenly a very sad slinky, right? It's not gonna really, it doesn't have any power behind it, right? So you have to think about loading and releasing. If you are stretching these muscles before you lift, especially like statically, then you're actually losing power in it. Same goes for spending a ton of time foam rolling, lacrosse ball, even when I do body tempering, that big like dildo thing I had in my chest that brought out all the incels. Like it's the same thing. I don't want to spend a ton of time there before I go and like bench press or something, because I don't need this to be soft. I don't need it to be like weak. I need it to actually be tight. So what I want to do is globally activate the muscles that will maybe give that a break. I hope that makes sense. So with the psoas, because of its complexity of where it is in your body, this is exactly why you need to actually have quite a bit of awareness of where your pelvis and spine are. And also, like I was saying in the strength and flux, a lot of your shoulder problems are a result of psoas, tightness, weakness, same fucking thing, core instability. So before you can do either of these drills, can you do this? Can you literally stand with your arms straight, your pelvis neutral, your spine neutral, and bring your arms up by your ears? If you can't do that, this isn't really the drill for you, but I'm gonna show you how to do a half kneeling lunge, and you can implement a press as your mobility improves. And it will improve, it takes a while. So I know we wanna just get right in there and fix it right away, but when you're talking about a muscle that's like crossing, like that has so many jobs and really important jobs, then it's gonna take some time. And if you don't have the time for it, well then call me when you get a shoulder replacement. Okay, so in a half kneeling position, I'll show you just the like regular stretch first, because everyone seems to fuck this to hell too. So your knee is straight down. I might need a mat for this, but whatever. These are actually nice floors. So I'll show you with a flat foot. What you're trying to do, right? So if I'm here, right, that's where my psoas is just kind of like pulled this way. So how I lengthen or stretch the psoas is I find a posterior tilt of my pelvis, right? Anterior tilt and posterior tilt. So you can even feel right there. I have my hand here because I'm actually trying to not shorten psoas right there, right? So hand here, there. You see all sorts of shit. Right now we're just doing this. So remember I showed you too last time that to achieve a posterior tilt of your pelvis, you have to bend your knees. So that's why that kneeling position is so helpful. Also, people have a really fucking hard time holding it in a standing position. They can't balance well. Their legs aren't very strong in a static position. Imagine that. It goes hand in hand. So what you're gonna do is line your hips up. So you wanna be like, make sure that you're square, right? So not like this or this, right? You want to be like this. Try not to let that knee open to the side. In fact, actively use your foot to prevent that from happening. And then, you know, can you do this? Switch sides, see if you can do that. So on the side where the knee is bent, this will actually make it easier for you to press because you're shortening psoas. So if you have a hard time getting into this position without dumping into your lower back, right? Kind of the same thing that I was just talking about. No, the same thing I was just talking about, not kind of. Then shortening psoas, or your hip flexor, I should say. I'm just referring to it, whatever, you know. This is all a very gross simplification, but it helps to illustrate what you're trying to do, I think anyway. That's all that fucking matters is watching my shit. So here, right, it's much more comfortable to get here if I'm super tight in that hip flexor. So, the problem is that when that knee is bent, people tend to feel less stable there, so they kind of like cave over to that side. So often having like a staggered position helps a lot. Even just having the one knee bent will help a lot with that lack of mobility in the thoracic spine. This is why a lot of people start here when they do overhead movements. So if you don't know how to press a kettlebell too, that's probably something that you should learn. I don't really have time to go over all of that. I'm just trying to show you how I would do a dynamic mobility stretch that's also a killer shoulder move, total body, but you know. So I'm gonna load it into rack position. Notice my wrist stays completely straight. So now I'm gonna curl my toes under and tuck. Chest proud here. Now it's lighting that up. So I'm squeezing my glute, opposition to hip flexor, tight on this side, pressing through the foot, pressing through this knee, and actively pulling my toes into the ground. So you see how much taller that makes me? Okay, so again, if you don't know how to press a kettlebell, it's not the same thing as a dumbbell. It requires a little more finesse, a little more skill. That's a good thing. But if everything hurts and you're not fucking making any progress, you should probably learn the skill that will help you do those things. So then the other one that I'm gonna go over with you is the Z press. Now this definitely requires a lot of mobility. So what you're doing with this one is you're gonna be in a totally flexed hip position, and then you have to reach your chest up. So it's very difficult for a lot of people to even get into that position at all. So it's a lot of hamstring, right? Because you're gonna have completely straight legs, and then trying to have a completely straight back. So you can't go into, you can't really arch you can't move your pelvis forward, right, to compensate. Your pelvis is in a fixed position. So you're using those hamstrings isometrically to press you down into the floor and stabilize you, to try to get that length through the body. So with psoas shortened like this, you really have to be able to lengthen through your upper back. So make sure that you can do this first. It's not pretty otherwise. It's pretty bad. See what I did there? I'm hungry and it's time to go home. So here, pressing through both legs. Okay, so I have a ton of mobility. You know, people kind of make fun of me because if they watch me do yoga class or something, haha, I'm not very flexible. No, not like that. But when I'm talking mobility, meaning when I'm like in an active, loaded position, I have a ton of mobility. In fact, somewhat to a detriment. I really have to learn to rein it in. That's why I don't passively stretch. That's why I don't spend hours foam rolling, because that shit doesn't help me. What helps me is learning how to position my body in the correct place and then loading it so that I'm teaching it how to do that. Does my body feel amazing all the time? Fuck no, but I put it through the fucking ringer, and I take any discomfort that it tells me about very seriously. Shit happens, stressed out, working a lot, not eating as much as I should, at least not eating well. Yeah, shit's gonna hurt. I'm 37, for God's sake. I know that's not super old, but it's also not 22. There's a lot of circumstances. But what I do is anytime my body, especially my shoulders, I'm really protective of my shoulders, tell me, listen, bitch, I don't feel good, you need to change something, I take that shit really seriously. So once again, these are pretty advanced movements, but advanced people need shit too. In fact, you guys probably need it more than anyone because you're the ones likely to just plow through it. Add that shit to your workouts. Make it a whole thing. If you do a press, make it a half kneeling press, or if you can, a Z press. It doesn't have to be boring, fucking repetitive correctives. Try this shit out. My name is Karis, Strength and Flux. Thanks for watching.